welcome everyone today, and more especially welcome us, Lesego. Um, I think from just the invitation, from everything you would have seen that, Osle Sejo is the founder and managing director of Gosele Advisory Services. She's a chartered accountant by profession, but I like people to introduce themselves because I believe that no one can tell your story better than you can. So I'm going to open it up and let Osle Sejo introduce herself, tell us about her journey to where she is now. She is, it's amazing. She's who I want to be when I grow up.
No pressure, Refilwe. Thank you very much. And morning, ladies and gentlemen. What does one say after such an eloquent introduction? Firstly, thank you to the organizers for having me this morning. Ntombi, you clearly have a soft spot because it's probably one of my busiest periods. But when you sent the call, I couldn't say no. So thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for having me on this platform. I don't take it for granted, and I'm highly humbled by it. So my journey, it's been what? 20 years, actually. You forced me to reflect because my first year of formal work towards my profession was in 2000 when I started my articles with Deloitte, and really served the 3 years, which was probably the most grounding period. I believe it was a period where a solid foundation was laid for my professional journey. And it came with a lot of hard work, determination, dedication, being A-type perfectionist. One was always placed on probably the most complicated audits. I got to run the SAA audit in my second year of articles, which doesn't happen. I mean, it was probably one of the flagship clients for the firm at the time. As a result, and did quite well. High pressure, but still considered one of the best auditors in charge for that audit many years later. I mean, it's been quite a while since I left Deloitte. As a consequence, got to be appointed as part of the team that was putting together that global audit program for the airlines, because then Deloitte US want to audit airlines, being Delta Airline and United Airlines, which was great exposure that many trainees don't get to experience. And so I had, because of one of your questions you asked was around mentorship, because of the mentorship and support that I had in that structure, I had a solid foundation in terms of experience, which really led to, I believe, the professional that I am, and the spaces that I'm able to occupy, in my current journey. It's evolving, it continues to change, but yeah, so here we are. After Deloitte, I did a short stint in the banking space, about 5 years, with FNB, and a short stint with Nedbank. Um, and there it was a different learning. Got to deal with mass banking, got to be a great support to the provincial executive, got to understand that I'm not a conventional accountant. I'm not a bean counter type of accountant. I love numbers, but I enjoy engagement with people more. So you can never put me in the back office and hope that I won't slit my wrists. It's likely to happen. So I enjoy being in the forefront, engaging with people, and solutions defining as well. So when I left banking, the entrepreneurial bug hit. Unfortunately, it was 2008 and the global economic crisis hit. We were servicing SMMEs because that was the gap where, from a financial controls perspective, from a how do you get your business ready in terms of compliance perspective, you know, that market is not well serviced, certainly not by your big firms. And so there's usually a struggle. But the flip side of that is when you're in a global recession like we are now, your back office type of support takes the back seat. I'm more worried about paying my trucks so that they remain on the road. I'm more worried about, servicing staff so that they still show up for work. So, dear auditor or accountant, I'll see you when I get to you, which then meant we running our own business were then put on the back foot. And I had to make a tough call then in terms of saying, then what next? Because the bills have to be paid, right? Recession or no recession, life goes on. And that's when I did what I call my community stint, giving back, and served for about 2 years in public sector. Um, and there were two fundamental lessons I learned. One was to function in a dysfunctional environment. In fact, I resigned after 4 days, but somehow was gotten back and ended up being there for 2 years. So I learned to function in a dysfunctional environment because that was my first exposure as an internal staff member. Before then, you'd be an auditor, you're there for a couple of months, you're out. You know exactly what you need, you try and get it as best as possible. But here I was in the thick of things every day, having to solution for an environment that's not as efficient. And then the second lesson I learned was the importance of ethics, and especially professional ethics. I mean, we've seen it lately. Well, firstly, the profession has been quite challenged for the past number of years. I mean, Steinhoff didn't do our profession any justice. VBS hasn't done our profession any justice. Issues around African Bank, ESCOM, the list is endless. And so, that journey for me heightened the importance of taking yourself seriously as a professional, understanding what makes you tick. And from my perspective, is being in an environment where I feel I'm adding value and I feel I'm being valued. Those two are fundamental in how I'm wired. And the third one is actually having the balls, having the balls to say no when you know that the ethics are compromised, and most importantly, your professional standing will be compromised. And so ironically, being the team that said no and pushed back led to us being exited from that environment. But we walked away understanding that for the time period that we were there, we were intentional about making a difference, we were intentional about improving systems, and we were intentional about leaving the environment better than when we found it. And I believe that was achieved. So when I then left public sector, I took a sabbatical. I needed 18 months just to recoup and recenter. And during that time, ironically, Refilo was when I did the strategic leadership program run by IWCA in partnership with GIBS, which was perfect for the inflection point that I was at because it forced you to do a lot of self-work. And so I'm eternally grateful for that process. And as a consequence, I got to then give some of my free time initially to participate in the transactions that were coming up on the African Women Chartered Accountants investment holding side. And that led to that being my full-time gig for 5 years thereafter. At the same time, I was also then responsible for the professional development arm, being the African Women Chartered Accountants Forum. And that organization I ended up serving with for 12 years, 5 of which was at the helm. And I share that story because it's important. It shows that upward mobility is not instant. I think it goes to one of the questions you'll be asking later. It's a process. And oftentimes when we've painted this ideal picture and reality is somewhat removed from that ideal, it's very easy to feel like you're not making progress, whereas actually your cumulative consistent effort will lead you to a different space 5 years from now than when you look at, oh no, but I'm not where I thought I'd be, and become despondent and almost throw in the towel. And I think I call it the young syndrome. I don't know, I can't say I'm still young. I still struggle with it. But I think it's the young syndrome, where you're having that quarter life crisis. I had mine. Mine was huge. I had mine when I qualified. And I was like, they told me the world would be my oyster. Where's this oyster? Because I had defined my oyster to be something that was so out of reality that, I pegged myself against a senior partner who had been doing that role for 15 years, and I'm a newly qualified manager. That's just unrealistic. But at that time, I didn't see it as unrealistic because you're perfectionist, you're A-type, you're driven, as a young person, you want it now. It must happen now and it must happen instantly. And how this is then defined is as though you failed. And that's not the reality. Relative to where you are meant to be, you're actually potentially doing well and better than your peers. But how you choose to focus a lens on where you are can define whether you continue to succeed or not.
Oh, wow.
So I think for me, that was the biggest reflection point.
Wow.
And I had the privilege to run this investment arm. I learned a lot. I believe those 5 years were a period of learning from the University of Life. I don't know how many in the audience are entrepreneurs, but for those of us who are, you'll agree that it's not the easiest environment. It's actually very tough. And having to hustle every day, and you realize that even being a professional doesn't guarantee that you will get the outcome you endeavor to get. But it's about persistently and consistently chasing after this thing and seeing the vision as bigger than yourself and worth getting up every morning and going to chase after it. And I found it very exciting because, again, if you reflect on what I said earlier, I was engaging with people on a daily basis, different people for that matter. I was solutioning, but also working very hard on value creation for the collective in terms of the shareholders within that company. On the flip side, I was still also feeding my passion for developing others with the role that I was playing within the African Women Chartered Accountants Forum. We were running programs at school level, we're running bursary schemes, we were celebrating our members who were succeeding, ensuring that there are opportunities, and so on. So I think that journey probably defined my second tier of my professional lens. I'd say articles up until my banking stint were probably the first, and then running the investment arm and getting to a point where I'm running an organization that I've been part of at that time for 7 years, was also quite something meaningful. So yeah, I think, in a nutshell, that's been my journey. Currently, I'm running my own consulting outfit and really focusing on my role as a non-executive director. I have the privilege and blessing of serving on 4 listed boards, one of which I chair. Have been serving on that one for the past 7 years. And I think maybe there's something magical about the 7, right? It's probably the period in which it takes to be cooked, because if you think about it, most of your professional degrees take 7 years to qualification. Think engineers, certainly accountants, doctors are probably similar, lawyers are similar. So there's something about the 7, in the spiritual realm, they say 7 means completion. So there might be something about the 7. And yeah, I think in a nutshell, Refilwe, that's my story. And, I'll hand back over to you in terms of further questions.
Thank you. And I mean, that is literally, I mean, that's what I was saying. When I grow up, I want to be here, because that is that is a lot, but it's, thank you for sharing that. I think, I really liked, a lot of the stuff that you spoke about. And for me, as a young professional, as a young person, you touched on, your imposters, your young syndrome and your quarter life crisis, and seeing where you are right now. It's almost like, my anxiety is going, down. It's saying, phew, okay, if she's gone through that, then I'll be fine. And for me, this is what I love about these events, seeing these women that we look up to as young people, and hearing your journey, hearing your story, and the turbulations that you've gone through, and saying, okay, I'll be fine. If Lesego has gone through this and she's where she is right now, that means I'll also be fine. You spoke about, that moment that you went through, and then your young career. I'm wondering if you had somebody holding your hand through all of that, if you had a mentor or a sponsor, And I think more than that, how did you come about to finding that person, or did they find you actually? One of the questions that I asked recently in another interview was about, getting a sponsor in your professional life, because you can't go through it alone. You need that other person who's going to hold your hand and say, okay, do this, do that. As you go onto your entrepreneurship journey, as I am right now, thankfully I have Mr. Rankin who's holding my hand and saying, okay, don't do this, do that. So did you have, somebody holding your hand through that period?
Sure. I must say I've been blessed to have a number of people hold my hand. In my initial days, Deloitte had a specific program where people of color were given a mentor at a manager level and at a partner level to ensure that you got the right kind of exposure. It worked for some, it didn't work for others. I was blessed enough that mine worked, in that, the two individuals I was allocated to had a vested interest and were truly passionate about seeing this, my development take the shape that it needed to take. And that's partly what led to the kind of exposure that I ended up having during my 3-year training process. Obviously, that said, comes with your own determination and dedication and hard work in utilizing the opportunities that one is given. So, having that kind of mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship, because yes, I had clients, other clients, but at the same time, they ensured that I served on their clients so that they could personally monitor and manage my progress and assess where I was relative to where I needed to be. And so, it led to a solid base of clients in terms of exposure, but it also led to having a safe space to have conversations about my career progression and some of the things that we're grappling with. I mean, it's effectively your first point of entry into the world of work, the real world of work. And yes, we may be having 2 degrees and you're writing this board exam. That's not the easiest of things to do in the world. You're in an environment with fellow peers who've gone through the same journey, but we all had different challenges, right? And every client is not the same, and some clients might take a liking to you, others don't. So how do you navigate all of those elements? And so for me, it was great to have a manager that I could have those conversations with, but also a partner who had a vested interest in my development and being a success, and ensured that those opportunities were created for me. I mean, I talk about that global audit program. That's never happened for someone who's still doing the articles. Usually a manager would have been appointed to do that role. But because I had a partner who saw a bigger vision in terms of my development, that space was created for me. So it goes back to the point you were raising about how important is mentorship and sponsorship in one's career? And my answer is it's crucial. It's crucial. If I reflect on my journey, where I've had the most success has been where I've had that kind of support. So the next year of my journey, I then also had a very good mentor, sponsor, sister, boss. That relationship was something else, but because it was also a safe space, taking it to the next level where I really felt I was accepted, or my strengths were appreciated, my areas for improvement were acknowledged. We work like a hand in glove in that I'm a night owl, she's an early riser. So you had a factory that was running day shift, night shift. And so from an efficiency perspective, you had a lot of output come through from an environment that is not greatly resourced, because in an entrepreneurial space, there's always a challenge around resourcing. And so even though I worked around the clock, I burnt the candle on both ends and in the middle, I was really loving what I was doing, because I was in an environment that was enabling. I was in an environment that allowed me to do what I needed to do and effectively manage my time and manage what I needed to do, still having the lens on having the results in the end. So those were the 2 critical ones in my world. Then the third one is we all go through times where the chips are down, right?
Yeah.
So even in that time period, I think I've probably had two in my career journey in the 20 years. And the recent one was about 2017. So yeah, one day I'll write a book about 2017. But I mean, even in that process, I had, brothers and sisters really who were so resolute in their support for me that it made that tough time a bit more bearable. And one was a business associate. In fact, he runs one of the investee holding companies that I had participated in and still continue to serve on his board today. Because when times were tough, he said she's not going anywhere. She adds value to my environment, and I want her to stay on. And for me, that spoke a lot to personal integrity, to being people centric, to the value of relationships and solid relationships, not ones built on what can I get from Refilwe.
Yes.
And therefore, I'm going to have Refilwe in my corner because for as long as I have Refilwe on my side, I believe I can get X, Y, Z. As soon as I feel I will not be getting that from Refilwe, I can dispose of Refilwe. So for me, it made me appreciate the strength of solid people-centric, authentic relationships, that someone will stand in your corner even when the chips are down and there's no financial merit for them to do that. In fact, it would have served me more to say, sorry. And then, one other is my fellow CA sisters, and Kita Zatu was also very dear to me there. And another one, Bridget Matthews, because when you in your own right, it's difficult to see opportunities. And it was great to have fellow professionals open certain doors, because that's the thing, we are all interconnected, right? No man is an island, no woman is an island. So it's about having built those solid relationships and opening doors for others, because you'll never know when they might come to your rescue and you needing doors open for you. So that was also great, having that support. And then my soul sisters, Rosa Makapula and Judith Minisi. So in my 20-year career, I've had Andrew Mackey from Deloitte, Yolandi Grace from Deloitte. Those were the partner managers who were responsible for me. They are both now partners at Deloitte. I've had Sindima Basokoyana, whom I work with in public sector, but then also had to work with in the investment holding arm. And really someone I looked up to. So you say you look up to me and want to be like me when you grow up. When I was auditing SAA, Cindy was CFO's Transnet CFO, and SAA was a Transnet subsidiary. And I was walking from the one building to the next, and there she was driving in for probably an audit committee or board meeting. And there I was saying, "You go, girl, I'm coming after you." Little did I know that the universe would conspire, and fast forward to however many years later, there we were working together. And she literally took me by her arm and created an enabling environment that I got to grow as a professional. So I'd say that 10 years really defined the kind of leader that I am today. And then, as I said, Vic Ferreira, who runs a logistics company, who said, you add value, and because you add value, I still want you around my boardroom. That was really affirming, especially when the chips are down. As in Kita Zatu, as I mentioned, Bridget Matthews, Rosa Makapula, and Judith Nis. I think those are the ones, if I really reflect, that come top of mind from where I sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think it is the fact that you can point to those people and speak about them, but then also just I think for us as young people, it's so vital that we place ourselves and put ourselves in environments where we will be inspired, number one, to see, the sort of woman that you want to grow up and be like. You have to position yourself in those positions so you can see them, but more importantly, also they can see you and spot you and see your talent and say, okay, I can pick that one and, to develop that little one. So with that said, and you touched on this, earlier on in terms of your role at the AWCA, for example, and your role with the other board of chartered accountants, developing others. And the theme with this, with our Celebrating Women event has always been about amplifying the voice of women in particular, It is a big topic. It has been a big topic for a while now, but it is important that we have to, continue to amplify the voices of women, because men have been very loud for years and years and years. So what role are you playing in amplifying, in developing others, especially particularly women? I know we will touch on the other topic later on, because you are very passionate about bringing the boy child as well.
Yeah.
What role are you playing in mentoring others and paving the way for them as well?
Sure. I think over the years, I've not taken for granted the fact that the minute you assume leadership, you are mentoring whether you know it or not. Because you and I have not met, but by engaging with my journey, there's something that resonates in it for you to say, I want to be like her. So for me, it says it's virtual mentorship, that there are many other refillers that I'm unaware of who are looking up to a Lesego and saying, if she can do it, I can do it. Just like I looked up to the Cindy's of this world, Zodwa Manases, you name them. And that was partly why plugging into a professional member body was important, because it keeps you in tune and plugged in terms of the developments within the profession. I've mentored a number of people. Well, for me, if you make a call, if I can help, I'll help. That's the first thing. But a lot of the mentorship, I think, happens by virtue of, I see you, I recognize this. Can I have a lunch? Sure, let's have a lunch. Or I'm needing help with this. Can you connect me with this person? Because I appreciate how much of a difference that's made in my professional trajectory. And I believe in the universal language of abundance. I will not withhold it if I have it, because your success is my success is your success. And therefore, to the extent that I can contribute to a success, why should I not do it? Yeah. So that's been the journey. And then within the AWCA fold, I mean, we had a mentorship program. We created a program called Mentorship Circles, which then looked to incorporate people outside of the profession as well, and also not just focused on the girl child. And I know we'll touch on that later, but it's important so that we create balanced societies going forward. Because a lot of the challenges we face is, yes, women emancipation was important, women empowerment was and still is important, but it need not be done to the exclusion of our male counterparts, such that it creates an identity crisis in them. Because some of the societal challenges we face is facing gender-based violence and so forth, are as a direct consequence of our brothers who've not seen their mothers being what we are, and therefore don't know how to relate to us. And so you're being successful in the presence of a male counterpart whose self-awareness and self-assertion and self-worth is on shaky ground, only means that you will be the culprit in some shape or form. Whether it's verbal abuse, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's the pull-it-down syndrome within the household, whatever shape of, or whether it's him cheating on you, whatever shape or form it takes, is because he's not feeling masculated enough in that environment. Some of it, nothing to do with you, but by virtue of your success and having an environment that's shining such a lens on women, it becomes a challenge. So I do think it's important that we intentionally create environments that are not exclusive, so that as we are climbing this ladder and taking advantage of these opportunities that we are given, our male counterparts are walking the journey with us and appreciate our strengths and challenges, and we appreciate their strengths and challenges, and thereby creating solutions that are sustainable and all-inclusive, and ultimately creating societies that are functional, because the empowered woman is not going to exist in a vacuum, right? You're not going to exist in a vacuum. Lesego doesn't exist in a vacuum. She still wants a life partner. She wants, a home that's worth coming home to, She wants a confidant. She wants, you still want all of those things that are created naturally by God in his wisdom, understanding how he's wired us and how we need to function effectively in society. So I think it's important to take that into account. The other is, how then do we make room for women when we get the privilege to occupy these spaces of leadership? And for me, it's being intentional about it, right? The journey to the top is not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to make it look sexy and rosy. It's hard work, but it's worth it. And so you're finding that 27 years into democracy, you're still finding the one, the only, the whatever in boardrooms. So it tells me that we still have a long way to go. And one of the ways in which we can facilitate that fast tracking is, one, being intentional about it. Yesterday, we had the awesome news of the first, not only Black female, but the first female Auditor General in the Republic of South Africa. And that tells me that it's a journey, but when we are intentional about it, it happens. This has been a 7-year process in the making. When she stepped in as deputy, the intention is, we groom you and this is the journey. So there was a clear plan. And there were women who mobilized to make sure that that happens, right? Just like getting to this point, there were women bodies who mobilized to make sure that our voice of support was heard. And so that's being intentional and strategic around that issue. And so when you assume board or leadership roles, as a woman, how are you creating environments and opportunities for other women to occupy that space, vis-a-vis applying the pull her down syndrome, which is another challenge that we need to get through. Because if I've been the first for long enough, and I've enjoyed basking in this limelight, the psychological element of it is a challenge, and it takes a huge amount of emotional intelligence and maturity to recognize that making room for another woman is actually not a threat, but will contribute towards the collective being a stronger voice. Because what's the point of being the lone voice? Who's going to support your view around the boardroom when you're having a counter view?
Yes.
If you are among peers who don't really understand your perspective and are not necessarily open to hearing it, because it's easier to tick a box than to do things for the real reasons around transformation and diversity. Yeah. So I do think we need to be intentional about it, and we need to then say, how do I then make room for more women to join me? Because I don't want to be the one, the only occupying the space.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Before I go to my next questions, there's a lot of great comments on the chat box and some questions as well. And I think this one in particular from Dr. Nomvuyo Nogwe, we spoke about 26 years later into our democracy. South Africa's democracy is me. It's as old as me. I was born in 1994, and we still, spaces where there's only one woman or only one Black person at the table, and a lot of cases. For you in particular, I'm guessing that there's been many times where you've been the only woman. Where have by men? How did you navigate that?
Sure, Rafila, it's probably the most challenging part of going up the corporate ladder. There's the race issue, there's the gender issue, there's an age issue. You're making me reflect, and maybe I'm making peace with the fact that I'm probably ahead of my time. And that goes to that A-type, go-getter type of mentality. So I think my first board experience, I was formal. So one of the reasons I joined AWCA's board was when I qualified and I did my self-reflection, I was clear that I would want to serve on boards as a latter part in my career, but I wanted a safe space to learn. And so serving in an NGO facilitated that. And then I soon realized, this thing is not as sexy as we think it is. It's actually hard work. So when I got into the commercial side of it, I went in there with a clear understanding of what I was signing up for. but I still had this safe space to continue being groomed informally, and so forth. So my first official board experience was what, I think in 2009. That makes it what, 11 years ago? Yeah, somewhere there. And there I was the youngest. I think there were about 3 women. It was in public sector, so the race issue was not an issue, which at least takes away. That's the nice thing about public sector in the heydays before the challenges we're facing now. I think in some pockets you still have that aspect, in that you are respected for your professional credentials, you are taken as knowing what you're doing, and so your voice matters. So those 3 challenges are taken away. It's about how you apply yourself and how you show up, which is great. The more you migrate into spaces that view us as foreign, for lack of a better word, the challenges become more pronounced. So now you still have to prove yourself as a professional. There's no sponsor there who's saying, even if someone said, I'm referring Lesego, you are likely to walk into an environment where that person who said, I'm referring Lesego, is on their way out. In fact, I've had many appointments that are like that, where I thought, okay, I'm getting on board, I'm gonna learn from my fellow sister. 2 board meetings later, oh no, this person is stepping down. So there goes that. Now you end up with this new Black female. In most environments, I was the youngest, in an environment that is still in of itself transitioning with this diversity and gender parity narrative, right? And so how do you navigate that? One of the key things I've learned that are important is the importance of a meeting outside of a meeting. I can't say I've mastered it, but I've learned that it's important. Especially when you're in an environment where you are still building your own credibility as a professional and building the relationships and networks. The other thing that's important is your relationship with the chairman of the board. Still an area for improvement for me. But certainly something that's very, very important, because that defines how you feel heard or unheard within the board room, but also it also defines how confident you are to pick up the phone and say, Mr. Chairman or Mrs. Chairman, these are the concerns I have. How do we navigate them? Or this is how I propose we navigate them. In the absence of that, it makes the journey very lonely. Because you are the lone voice. You are in an environment where even if you are confident and self-assured in what you know, the undertone is that we're still waiting to see what you have to offer, right? And being a professional who takes them seriously, you still have your internal pressure that you create on yourself as well. So I do think those nuances are important to navigate, and to also then create a space outside of the formal space without compromising your fiduciary duties, where you can test check some of these things. Because invariably, by being the one and only, it feels lonely. When things go wrong, you feel like it's only happening to you, whereas your peers are experiencing the same issues in different boardrooms across the country. And that's why professional bodies like your African Women Chartered Accountants, your International Women's Forum of South Africa, and so forth, Business Women's Association, we can name them, there's a plethora in the country, are important because they solidify and create an environment where you can build a network of professionals around you, not just your like-minded people, by the way. You know, there's this concept of your personal board of directors. And often you surround yourself with people who've walked your journey, but each one of us needs a lawyer on our board of directors. If you look at an exco, you've got a marketing person, you've got an HR person, you've got legal, so your personal board of directors should take the same shape. And the only way it's going to do that is if you cast your network of, your net of networks wider than just within your space of profession. So yeah, I think that's my 2 cents worth in as far as that question is concerned.
It was more than 2 cents. I was like, we're 100 times at least. But thank you that, so, just there's a lot of great comments, and I think, a lot of questions, and I want to hear from everyone.
Yes.
Want to turn this is the moment where you go and fix your hair, put on some lipstick, get out camera on. I know it's such a want the camera on. To get on to my last question, and I think this is very important, as at least for those of us who the Matedisos and the Mashlatis who are here, us young people who are here, and that is, I spoke about my quarter life crisis last year, and I think a main part of that was, Vic actually said on the comments, be intentional and deliberate in creating your environment and the people you associate with, right? And I was fortunate that, I've been in a lot of rooms, and I have, a great network of really successful people around me, mainly because of the school I attended and just the people I've come across throughout my life. But then one of the things that I did was compare and want to fast track my success. So I'd be sitting with, at 23, sitting with somebody who's 33, and we're hanging out, we're having a drink or whatever the case is. And I'm thinking, this person is so ahead of me, they're a manager, whatever the case is. Not thinking, well, I feel like when you were like finishing matric, or even when you were 10 years old, this person was already in university. Calm yourself, calm down. And that is one of the things that I failed to do. And I was just looking at where I was at that time and thinking, and also more importantly, what is my purpose? I had job a lot. As millennials, we're known to job hop a lot. So 8 months into a position, I'd be like, okay, what's next? I'm over this. What's next? And I got to that feeling of, okay, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep going on to the next job. I need to find what it is what is my life purpose, And thankfully, I had a coach, I had a great relationship with an executive coach who said, okay, let's sit down. Let's sit down and figure this out. And it was through that process that I really got to a point where I figured what my life purpose is. And thankfully, I found it very young at 25. But not everybody is fortunate to find it that young, So what is for us, especially in particular young people, but I think for everybody else, who hasn't found what it is their life's purpose is, what is your advice in finding that? And just basically, I want to say, like, calm down. Calm down.
Exactly. So I was gonna say, in true young people's language, just chill, take a chill pill. If 40-something-year-old Lesego would talk to 20-something-year-old Lesego, I'd say just chill. Chill. Just take time to smell the roses. You've done well. Not everybody can pass the board exam, for goodness sake, So you've done well. And it's a classical quarter life crisis. I call it that. I had my own, as I said earlier, when I qualified. And your story is similar to mine. So there I was pegging myself against 10, 15 years ahead of me. How on earth do you think you're going to catch up on 10 years overnight?
I know.
You can run, but you can't outrun the process. You can accelerate it, you'll tire yourself out. And to balance things out, you'll have to, your system or the world will force you to shut down if you refuse to listen to your system. And so, there's nothing wrong with ambition.
Yes.
But it's important to ensure that our ideals are not so out of touch with reality that we become our own worst enemies. I call it ugly Susie. So when that voice starts, I say, I know, you can shush, ugly Susie. Because quite frankly, moving and making progress towards the direction of your dreams on the daily means that you are making the right steps. And if you do happen to fail, it's okay to fail forward because it's part of the process. It means you've tried something. It means you are doing something that your peers are possibly not looking at doing. And it's okay to fail. So, what differentiates South Africa to the US, as an example, especially around the entrepreneurship space, is the fact that you are rewarded for failing because you've tried something new. Whereas we're the inverse of that, right? And so you're in an ecosystem that says when you failed, there's something wrong with you, instead of saying, actually, you tried something that no one else has dared to try. And yes, you might have not gotten it right this time around, but how many other lessons have come as a consequence of walking that journey. And it took a long time for me to come to this point. I mean, in my 20s, when one of my colleagues at FNB said to one of our co-workers, he had written his exams, he was studying with UNISA, worked very hard, you know, and he didn't pass this one exam. I think he got 40%, I can't remember. Then says, but you know, it's okay. It means that you now know 40% more than you knew. There I was sitting as a 20-something. I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? You still didn't pass. But actually, he was telling the truth. It means you actually know 40% of the curriculum. Therefore, you need to focus on the next 20 to make sure that you pass the next time around. And so we are in a society that inherently wires us to think that failure is fatal. And yet failure is part of the process. And there's no one who's in leadership who doesn't have a failure story. We all have it. Yeah. And you might see the glitz and glam, and in the age of social media, it makes it even worse. But trust me, you're only seeing a lens to a book that is so full of peaks and troughs that, you know, it's those trough moments, they have to happen, because in the absence of that, you become so arrogant in your capabilities that you'd think you're the it. So in my journey, I actually appreciate the trough moments, because I realize they've prepared me for the next mountaintop. Sure. And then you walk through that journey and it ends, because all good things and bad things must have their cycle and life cycle. And then you go through another trough moment. And that's another preparation for the next mountaintop. What that does is when you get to that mountaintop, you remain humble in the sheer understanding that you've been cooked to get there. And therefore, when you are there, one of the key processes is appreciating that your fellows who are there and those you carry with you are actually also being cooked, and you lead with more sympathy, you lead with more emotional intelligence, you lead with empathy, you lead with understanding that actually you need others for you to succeed. You achieve results through others. And so how you then engage with the teams that you've had the privilege to have serving with you is important, and is defined by your own personal journey and your own experiences to a greater degree.
Wow. Wow. I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't want this to end, actually. Like, and the 28 people who heard you say you're going to write a book one day, and we're going to book, because I am waiting for the book now. I'm just like, I want to read it 10 times, 3 times, I don't care, but this is too good. And we want more, you know. So I'm going to open up to questions, and there's a question here from Lesego. So I'm gonna read it out, because normally I pick on her to actually unmute yourself and talk, but I'm gonna leave her, let her be today, and I'll read out the question. And she says, Lesego, I like your phenomenon of being in a safe space. Can you share, how did you know that the safe space is safe given that you face issues like race, gender, and age? I think that's a great one.
Sure. Okay. So do you mind repeating that question again so that I don't waffle?
Okay, so it's she's saying she likes your the phenomenon of being in a safe space.
Yes.
And can you share, how did you know, that was a safe space, and given the the issues that you face, like race, gender, and also age as well?
You feel it. You feel it when something is authentic. You feel it. You know, absolutely. It's like saying, how are these people your friends? It's because you connected on a level that just feels right. You know, how do you choose your employer? How do you choose to stay in any environment? It's because you feel affirmed, you feel at home, you feel you can bring your best foot forward, you know, without that element of feeling like you're being judged, without that element of feeling that your colleagues would be very quick to backstab you. Even if they do, you feel that you've got some level of protection to speak your truth and be heard. It's all those aspects. So So you feel it. I mean, and some of it, the universe conspires. It's like the conversation we're having today. You know, Ntombi and I probably haven't seen each other in 20 years or more. But you always go full circle, right? And because of the relationship that we built in our young days, the call for me was an easy one to respond to. So I think the long and short of it is that you'll feel it, you'll know, you've got to trust your intuition. So to this day, even when I go for a board, they call it conversation. It's not an interview. It's a conversation. Even when I go for those, I tune into the undertone of the environment. Things like, do I get a sense that the employees are happy to be here? And you'll see it in how they treat you. You'll see it in how they show up. You'll feel it from reception all the way to going to the top floor. You know, how the PA is engaging with you. Are they genuinely happy or are they dragging their feet? You can see it. I think for women, it's even easier because we are naturally nurturers. And so for me, it's one of the key tick boxes that I need to tick before I say yes or no.
Huh. Wow, thank you for that. I think for all of us, we should take that to heart, you know, intuition, especially when you're going for an interview and so forth. Also, Lesego, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, actually, you know, thanks a lot, Lesego, because I in fact wanted to hear that, you know, because often, I mean, I think for me personally, the gut is very, very important, actually, and that's the one thing that leads me into whether am I around the authentic space or am I around the fake space, you know? And I think it's important for, you know, people that are young in organizations to also know, that, you know, when your gut tells you something about the space, you must actually trust it, you know? So, so I'm actually, so I'm happy. It actually confirmed exactly my philosophy, you know, but I wanted you to say it because it's important for the young ones to hear it.
It is so critical. Let me give you two examples, or I think one. It's just as important even in decision making. So oftentimes when you are the youngest, different race, gender, you question your own input. There were two instances in this board where I thought of something and didn't raise it. And it went its full circle, and what I thought at the time actually played out. And I reflected and I thought, but you realize that your intuition was on point and you chose to silence the voice, and you could have driven the conversation around the room to a different trajectory, which could have potentially led to a different outcome. Or if it hadn't, your voice would have been noted, right? Wow. So when I reflected on that, I understood and appreciated even more why tuning into your intuition is so important.
Wow. Thank you for that. I mean, I honestly needed to hear that. You know, I've been in quite a few spaces and you know, environments this year alone where my intuition was saying, baby girl, this is not for you, but I didn't listen. And then the whole building fell on me, you know, which the universe is really like, I told you to move, you know, I told you to leave this area. So I think it's very important to always listen to your intuition the first time around, especially, and not the second or the third time, because the signs keep getting worse and worse and worse.
That's true.
Thank you, both of you. Actually, also, Lesego has told me this before, but as young people do, we don't listen. So I'm going to open this up to, you know, to everybody else. You know, we have 15 minutes. And Uncle Vic wants the last 5 minutes, so I have to comply. So I'm going to give us 10 minutes. I want to hear from everyone, you know, what has been your takeaways from this? I was moderating, but I was also writing down because there's just so many moments that I was just like, oh wow, so many aha moments that I took away from this conversation. What has been everybody else's, you know, takeaway moments? I'm going to actually ask, do me. I know you've written.
Tolly's got her hands up.
It out because I think this is very important. If you don't mind.
Sorry. I
wanted Dumi to say his comments. He put it down, but I want him to say it.
Oh, okay. And then you've got Tolly and Ntombi's hands up.
Yes, okay.
If I can just tell you, Refilwe,
Yeah.
my hand is up because I'd like you to recognize also Dr. Nomvuyo, who's in Mauritius. Her line is a bit weak. She also has a comment, but I'd like us to give her an opportunity to actually speak if possible.
No problem. No problem.
Let's do that now, Sister Refilwe. Let's do that now.
Okay, okay. Dr. Nokwe, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was so enlightening and so inspiring. I mean, I know being the first Women Secretary General of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, I mean, I encounter, you know, amazing stuff. This is more social, cultural, because I'm working, actually, I'm the only female in my establishment. And I have all these males coming from different, you know, cultures. And I'm encountering serious resistance because one, they cannot recognize that I'm a woman, a capable one for that matter. Two, I'm an African woman. And I think when South Africa put me in this position, and I really appreciative of my country of nominating me as the first woman Secretary General for this August organization, that has its premise from no other than Utata Nelson Mandela. So I feel very proud about it. But I think the thing now that I'm encountering is a lot of resistance from my male counterparts who come from various countries. And it's more this cross-cultural resistance that I'm encountering. And I mean, I'm almost at my feather because I'm constantly fighting, putting processes and systems in an organization that is like over 20 years, but it didn't have any. Yeah. But now I've been edged out anyway, but which is fine. And I'm really grateful because my country had to pull me out because the resistance was awful. And I mean, it's impacting on me as well as my family. So now I'm just saying this, I know a lot of you have worked in the South African environment, but this is a totally a different environment that is really, how do you know, flammable, so to say. Yeah. So I just want to know, how did you manage and how do you know, go about it? Because I still have to keep on keeping on. I still have next year, you know, to hand over my seat. But I think I've got the value of all what you have been saying, and I kind of appreciate, and I'm ticking the boxes. I say, okay, I've done this, I've done that, but I think there's more that I just need to learn from you, and I highly appreciate that.
That is so humbling. I mean, I'm sure I have lots to learn from you. I think environments, it goes back to the notion I shared earlier, where you are the only, and you're now given this role of leadership. You are effectively the boss. And the cultural elements also play in. So firstly, it's the gender parity, gender diversity issue in an environment that was never designed with women in mind. Let's make peace with that first and foremost. The world of work was never designed with women in mind. So we are coming in and changing the game. In environments where I sense the resistance, I would continually raise the issue calmly. So one of the boards where I said I've been serving for 7 years and I've got the privilege to share now, the issue around employment equity and transformation always came up. And when we do the annual report, I'd say to the CEO, I'm concerned about these stats. At the time, I was chairing the Social and Ethics Committee. I'm concerned about these stats. What are the plans that we're putting in place to address it? Mm-hmm. And you can sense from the responses whether you've got buy-in or not, right? Mm-hmm. And that here, okay, there's pushback, because it gives you a sense. You've got to gauge your environment. Do I accelerate? Do I put the foot off the pedal? Do I put the brakes? Do I exit? Right. If it's gotten to a point where your own life and your family's life is at threat, for me, it's a no-brainer, you exit. In this environment, I knew that it was foreign for the people that I was dealing with, and therefore I needed to exercise patience, but still persist on the issue. So every year, when we got to that point, I would raise the same issue. Fast forward to 6 years later, when I got appointed as chair and we're having the celebration, The CEO himself said, Lesego has a way of putting a point across that forces you to actually reflect and think about it, and ultimately implement it as though it were your own. And he made that example, and he says, initially we were resisting, and I chuckled and I said, I know. Because I knew they were resisting. And so I knew that there was no, I'm not a fighter naturally, I'm a peace lover. And there was no ways I was gonna win trying to butt heads, because that's not how I'm wired. But I knew I needed to influence the thinking, because you'll have more longevity and success if there's commitment and buy-in from the implementers. I'm only there once a quarter. For true empowerment to happen, management need to buy into it and then put processes and procedures that will facilitate this thing. As an overseer, I need to come back and say, are we still on track? Who are the rainmakers? What are we doing around them? What are we doing around women in this industry? So you're asking those probing questions. It might take them 2 to 3 years to implement, but you've planted the seed. So you may feel despondent in your space, but you actually may not have the lens, especially in the absence of people you can trust in your environment, who become your confidant, who become your mirror, who then also give you a perspective that's outside of, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm hitting against a brick wall type of lens. In the absence of that, it can be very, very challenging to lead an organization. So one of my advices, which I learned from my previous bosses, was get at least 1 or 2 people you can trust, people who have your back. And that's why most executives move with someone who's their own team, because they know they're walking into a foreign environment, and for them to succeed, they need to have a solid, authentic, honest sounding board that they can go to. So that would be the first observation I've made from women leaders that I've walked the journey with. And then secondly, seek counsel also from your peers who might not necessarily be in your space. Because once again, I said, you often think like you're the only one who's going through those challenges. I can tell you now it's universal across. If you were to speak to Sis Pumzile at the UN, she would probably share the same story, similar to you. If you were to speak to Sis Nozipo as the ambassador, she'd probably have similar stories. If you were to share, if we were to fill this session with Black female directors or executives, they would share similar war stories. And part of it is because society is wired. In fact, nature, I observe nature and I think, okay, this was a creation of God, in that patriarchy is the center of this thing. And we are coming and saying, but some of the decisions that are made without the element of a nurturing spirit are actually causing distraction. So let's have a balanced view around the decision-making room and make room for us. But you are saying make room in an environment that says, I hear you, but I'm more comfortable with my brothers. This is how I've done it for the past donkey years. Yeah. So we've got to understand that and then say, the resistance I'm feeling is actually a deflection of their own insecurities. Let me not carry that monkey. Ooh, without being derogatory, So yeah, because as women, we carry things that are not for us to carry. I know I've done that many a times in my career. So this is not for me to carry. It's actually a deflection of, I'm a perceived threat, because the tone around the world is, it's an era for women. But this is all I know to do as a man. So if you're now coming to take what I've been eyeing to do for my career trajectory, how do I engage with you? Because firstly, you've taken my spot.
Yeah.
Understand that. Firstly, you've taken my spot. Secondly, I feel like you are imposed on me. And it's a helicopter. You've just come in from nowhere and you are here. Thirdly, I don't engage like this with my wife at home. She's not the boss. She's not the boss. If you understand that it doesn't matter which culture you look at, that is the consistent theme. I mean, one of my favorite programs to watch is a 90-Day Fiancé and 90-Day the other way. And you see the cross-cultural dynamics playing. The standard theme is that patriarchy is it. That's how the world has been wired. So when we assume these roles as women, we need to understand, African women will get this, where you say, Zitobe, humble yourself, and know that by me pushing to get what I know needs to happen is not necessarily going to help me achieve the results that I need to achieve. I actually need to invest 2 years, if it takes that long, in getting the collective to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best investment anyone will ever make. I mean, I was young, impatient. That very first board I was talking about, we had a change in leadership, and a woman, keep strong, sissy, keep strong. And a woman took up chairmanship of that board, and I was then given the responsibility to chair the audit committee. We had huge changes in the board, new dynamics, because we amalgamated 4 organizations into one. For a good year, we didn't have what I would call a board meeting. We didn't. There were no decisions made. And I would walk out very frustrated, and then she would be chuckling. She's saying, we're making progress, because she was wired differently to me. And she understood that it was more important to get all of us to function as a cohesive, especially the newcomers who now feel they needed to flex their own muscles because it's a foreign environment and they purely playing out their own insecurities. And she invested that whole year in getting us to a point where we are now all on the same page and everybody is comfortable that ultimately we all have the interest of the company and the shareholders at heart. And only in the next year did we not have a board meeting where someone would say, I'm not passing this thing, I didn't get. For a whole year, every quarter would get there and 1 or 2 directors would say, I can't vote on this thing. Mm-hmm. You can imagine how frustrated management were being.
Yeah.
But she felt it was important to invest that year so that everybody's on the same page. We can all dance to the same tune, and therefore moving the organization forward would be easier.
Easier.
All right. That's what happened.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm looking at the time now. So I'm going to ask Koli and Sane, because I see your hands up. I'm going to ask you to ask your questions both at the same time, and then we'll have AWCA answer them, and then that will be our last, and then we'll hand it over to Mr. Rankin.
And Dumi?
I'm actually going to read Dumi's comment because he had put it down, and this was on the takeaways, and he says, for my takeaways is, be patient with the process and apply yourself every time. That's very vital. I'm taking that. And then also lead with humility and empathy. I think that's another key one as well. And work with a mentor or coach. I always say this, in my workspace as well, when I'm, working with young people, it's so important to get a coach and get a mentor. I am where I am today because I've had mentors and coaches throughout my career. So thank you for that, Dumi. I'm going to ask Koli first to ask the question.
Okay, hi everyone. I wanted to say that sometimes we get labeled as we are difficult. How do you handle that situation? That's my question.
Okay, and then Sane, your question?
Okay, mine's not really a question, it's more of a comment. The environment that I've worked in for the last 25 years is very much male white dominated. But I think the one thing from the session that actually resonated the most is the importance of the meeting outside the meeting. So you have board meetings, you have quarterly meetings, you have monthly meetings, but all decisions are made in the meetings outside the meeting. So whatever you're doing, whenever you're proposing something, whenever you're thinking about something, you've got to engage people in the meetings outside the meetings. And that's actually the one thing which I think our white counterparts are taught by their mentors early in the corporate game, which we learn later.
Yeah.
Okay. But thank you so much, Sis Lesego, for sharing.
We learn later or we learn the hard way.
True.
Thank you. Refila, you have to remind me of the other question now. Sorry.
We are often labeled as difficult. And I think about Black women, there's this whole angry Black woman thing going around. How do you deal with that?
I think be resolute in what you firmly believe in. Be resolute in the points that you feel are important and need to be addressed. And I think for me, it also still talks to leading with empathy and leading with understanding. So it lends itself to how you put the points across and how you show up. So when those kind of comments are thrown, my advice is always step back. Which part of it is true? And if any, how can I change it? Because it's within your scope of control to change it.
Yeah.
Which part of it is not? And how do I then engage with it so that it doesn't affect how I show up and doesn't affect my intention of putting my points across without feeling judged? So it goes back to that whole issue. Someone, I heard someone comment when I said, don't own the monkey. I wasn't being directional. There's that comment in corporates that says, don't take on the monkey, you know, get the monkey off your back. Don't do a chicken licking. You know, get the monkey off your back. So that which is within your scope of control, deal with it. Fantastic, great, because that's part of your journey of growing. It's feedback, which often actually in those environments is not given, you know, unless there's either it's making people uncomfortable, and to the extent that it is, which part of it is you created and which part of it is other people's insecurities or issues created. You created can be fixed, other people created can be engaged, but it's not within your scope of control to change.
Wow, thank you for that. And thank you, everyone. You know, there's been so many wonderful messages. I hope everybody's been reading the comments as well, because, you know, everybody's just putting their input onto this. I'm learning a lot. And I think for me in particular today, if there's only one thing I'll take away from this, and I will throw it back to everybody else as well, is what Oscar said about, you know, when it's more particular mentorship, you know, you never know who is looking up to you. You're a mentor, whether you know it or not. And I think there's so many people here who are doing great, you know, in their spaces, but you don't particularly think of yourself that way. But there is a little refuger out there who's looking up to you, whether it's through LinkedIn, Instagram, even on Twitter, whatever platform, you know, it is that you're on. You could be just at the mall, walking out of, you know, my favorite thing, I love seeing Black women driving expensive cars. That's the north of Joburg, seeing Black women driving, you know, luxury cars. And I'm like, one day. So whether you know it or not, you are a mentor. And I think be intentional about, you know, being whatever it is that you're doing in that space. And there is somebody looking up to you out there. So I think that for me has been the key thing here. And to everybody else, you know, do that. And thank you for today. And thank you for the wonderful congratulatory messages that I received earlier as well. I'm looking forward to this journey and very excited. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to our fearless leader, Mr. Gosele.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And as usual, Refiwe, excellent work. And thank you very much, Lesego, for what you've done. One of the things that I'm always told at the end of this is, you know, you never tell us what value it is about to some of the people that are here. So give me 2 minutes. I'm going to rush through this very quickly, and I do speak very quickly and sometimes intentionally. But I think one of the things that struck me is, Lesego, you're talking about mentoring. And mentoring is essential. And whether it's subconscious or unconscious or deliberate or unintentional, it's important for you to actually examine oneself to ask, you know, am I mentoring? Can somebody speak of me in the manner that you've spoken to about some of the mentors that you're mentoring? And one of the important things about Value Add is that we like to bring in young people who are being mentored as a you know, supplement to what we do. We believe inspiring is essential. So what we do in our program is designed to inspire. It's the quintessential need in terms of getting ambition. You're not going to be ambitious if you're not inspired. And the critical element as well is merging professionals. So you'll find that within our programs, we bring in a lot of people from outside who come in and really just participate in terms of ensuring that young people can get to visually see what can possibly inspire them. We're online consistently, but we'll hybrid that when the time comes and enables us to do. In our flagship program is really that of the self-mastery. You talked about emotional intelligence. You talked about the need to have that. And we try and instill that consistently. It's a moment where I always say, and some of the students are here, by the way, some of the participants in the Value Add program are here. And I always say to them, use this 1 hour for self-reflection, self-examination, and an ability for you to internalize some things that you may be going through. We include in there a core program on leadership. We include what we call a mogul masterclass and a leadership masterclass, where we bring in leaders and moguls to come in and have a chat. And then one of our flagships as well in there is also the Career Discussion Academy, where we bring people to have a conversation about their careers, but not just about the careers, but the path. You know, that it's not a straight line from point A to point B in terms of the direction you're going. And Lesego, you talked about that quite extensively. We have a whole variety of courses. We're really excited about how Value Add is picking up. So we had the self-mastery course, but we also have the social media personal branding. We've got Valuepreneur, which is for startup businesses. We've got a teachers program. We've just introduced a networking one with a very powerful lady from the UK who specializes in networking. We've got a retrenchment program, retrenchment and job uncertainty, really supporting people in terms of those who've gone through retrenchment and are going through job uncertainty, but giving them this sort of capability about what the world can offer them after that. We've got a marketing program that's coming soon. Oli here is going to be part of that, and she's going to be running that program. And we've got Value Add Teens. Our Value Add program is designed purely for, at the moment, for the youth, but we've now gone into the teen space between 13 and 18. And we've got one of the ladies here, I can't see her, oh, she should probably come off, who's going to be running that as well. And then we're hopefully wanting to start a relationship program. All our programs range between 300 rands to 350 rands. And I really want to give a shout out to all the patrons. We got patrons here who are sponsoring young people onto the program. The ones that I've seen here are Sis Nkele, who's here. We've got my sister, Dr. Nomvuyo, who's sponsoring. I know Pinky's sponsoring. I've got, I think Kopano who's sponsoring. Sorry if I've left anybody out. Sorry, but thank you for all the patrons who are here and those who come on board. Please, if you feel that you can do that and support a young person to come on board, do that. And the last thing I just want to talk about is we have a session coming up on the 29th, which is a Sunday. It's called Know Your Country. It's a reunion based on the book called from Shantanu Naidu, Women in Solitary. And what I'd like to do is actually make a shout out to Loretta here, Nzanga, who's actually the granddaughter of Mama Rita, who's actually featured in the book. So please, if you can join us for that, that will be fantastic. And then look out for our overviews. Our overviews, where we run a lot of overviews on these programs. So yeah, that's me. And that's all. And yeah, once again, thank you very much. This is always very powerful. So, you know, when you speak, that book, a year is too long. I think I'm expecting 3 books in a year.
Yep.
You drop massive pearly words of wisdom. And I want to reflect that back to you to say what you say and what you speak is profound and powerful.
Yes.
And I really would encourage you to articulate that from a visual point of view. So be recorded when you have these conversations, but also in script. So if you can write it down, because I think it's really relevant and very needed.
Vic, before you forget, to everybody else, we are having our year-end Celebrating Women event where we bring in all these incredible women.
Yes. Absolutely.
So you have some for that one.
Yes, the last event is on the 12th of December, and we're bringing all the guest speakers that were there before back again.
Yes.
So they will be giving a few short synopses of what they actually said. If you go into our website under Celebrating Women, you will see all the videos of the past conversations. So feel free to do that, but come back on the 12th because they'll all be back and giving a synopsis of what their speeches were, but what to take into 2021 that they believe would be useful for the voice of women. That's it.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a fantastic weekend. And thank you again, Lesego. Thank you very much.